All right, today let's talk about the American Empire. Because we hear so much about it in the news, on podcasts, on YouTube, about all these so-called experts saying that our future is a decline. Mind you, all these experts are people that did what the system told them to do and were rewarded for it, and we call those people successful. So take everything they say with a grain of fucking salt. The truth is, we're living inside of a system that doesn't need us anymore. We can all feel this internally. It's just not always easy to name. For most of history, power has depended on us, the people. Empires needed soldiers who believed. Empires needed workers who sacrificed. Empires needed citizens who consented. And when that belief broke, the empire broke. That dependency is gone. So where are we now? Well, now modern power does not rule through loyalty. It rules through systems. Wars run without drafts. Economies run without workers having any leverage. Politics runs without actual consequences. Decisions are justified by markets, models, and security needs. No one seems fully in charge, yet nothing ever stops. This is not tyranny in the old sense. It's something colder. It's something called a post-human empire, which is a system that does not need belief, does not need sacrifice, and does not need participation from the majority. And it barely needs legitimacy. A post-human empire needs flows, capital flows, energy flows, data flows, and labor just stable enough to keep things running. People still exist inside of it, but as inputs. Inputs we call tax bases, consumers, risk variables, and narrative noise. Those are what people are in our system. They're not humans, like we think of as cows not having feelings or thoughts or intelligence or any of that. It's the same kind of perspective. That's why outrage fades into nothing. That's why scandals like this Epstein bullshit going on will change absolutely nothing. That's why voting feels hollow, but quitting feels impossible. The system isn't listening to us, and it never will. It's optimizing. You may have noticed this by a feeling of national decay. You see, because all empires fail, because the citizens no longer fight, because the violence is outsourced, and because the elites detach from the consequences. The Vietnam War was the moment that the US military discovered its breaking point. The soldiers stopped believing in the war. They stopped obeying. And they even turned on their commanders with frag grenades. Now that didn't end the empire. It forced its evolution. Instead of asking people to fight, we outsourced violence to contractors and proxy wars. We abstracted war with drones, missiles, and sanctions. And then we hid the costs underneath debt, inflation, and future obligations. Old, dying empires relied on mercenaries. This dying empire relies on abstraction. We are not living in the Roman Empire 2.0. We are living in something far more advanced and far more fragile, because this system will not collapse loudly and abruptly like we were told empires do in the past, which is absolute bullshit. There's no empire in history that has come crashing down in an instant. Why? Oh, because there are still people. What really happens is empires hollow out. Politics becomes a theater. Citizenship just becomes a branding label. Politics has become a theater. Citizenship has just become branding. War has become just the background noise of everyday life. Some war happening in some distant land. This has been happening for decades. And life has become just administered survival. A majority of people have stopped believing anything they do actually matters. And that's the real breaking point. Not rebellion, but the withdrawal of meaning. So we hear about this collapse all the time in our future decline. Well, collapse will not save us. That is a dangerous illusion. That collapse automatically produces renewal. It doesn't. Collapse or anarchy without structure produces warlordism, corporate feudalism, digital serfdom, and more scarcity politics. But a true united nation is not ever born of chaos. Chaos will just produce another system built on the survival mindset. A truly united nation, a truly United States of America, is born when people re-anchor power to human dependency. The question isn't how do we destroy the empire? The question is how do we force the system to need humans again? That's the pivot point for nationhood. The point at which you could use that downward momentum to create something new. Unless you would just prefer to focus on getting poorer from generation to generation. Because that's where our entire country is headed. So how do we take this momentum of downfall and turn it into a nation? Structurally, not emotionally. First, we need to stop trying to capture the system. We need to force it to depend on us. Post-human systems absorb reform. They outwall protest and they monetize dissent. They're monetizing this. You don't fight post-human systems head on. You build parallel leverage. Historically, a united nation emerges when tax flows change, when labor controls the choke points, and when legitimacy migrates away from the center and is distributed locally. Power follows dependency always. So we need to reclaim taxation from the core. This is the keystone. Empires tax work, tax labor. A united nation taxes unearned advantage, which prevents people from being able to hoard a majority of the wealth of an entire nation. Labor taxes fund wars, whether you voted for it or not. Rent, land, extraction, monopoly, and speculation taxes fund a war machine. As long as work pays for empire, empire will persist. When unearned wealth pays for society, war becomes just a bad investment. No nation ever exists without deciding who pays, who benefits, who bears the cost of decisions. That's not ideology. That's mechanics. We need to force power to become local again. Distance between the decisions made and the people affected is how irresponsibility survives. We need local energy, local food, local infrastructure, local manufacturing, local dispute resolutions. Not because local is nicer, but because consequences become visible. When decision makers have to live with the consequences of their decisions, behavior changes immediately. Scale and distance and centralization protects empires. Accountability builds united nations. War should be made politically painful again. Post-human empires thrive on painless war. So let's reverse that. Things like explicit funding votes for war, like we used to do with war bonds, or automatic war taxes, or clear objectives and end dates. And for the decision makers that decide to go to war, they're on the front lines. So all of this is kind of incentivized just national defense, rather than fucking with other countries around the world. War does not end when people oppose it. It ends when elites who profit from war can no longer externalize its costs. We also need to redefine citizenship as responsibility, not identity. Empires tolerate identity politics because identity does not threaten structure. Nationhood requires shared obligation, shared risk, shared benefit, and real participation from all the relevant population in decisions that shape daily life. No obligation, no nation. No responsibility, no sovereignty. We need to build economic floors, not promises. Self-governance requires stability. A united nation guarantees housing, energy, food and water, healthcare, not as charity, but as infrastructure for increased participation. Because a real democracy wants participation. A fake one does not. The persistent insecurity that we see all around us today is not freedom. It's control by design. We need to restore meaning outside of this garbage system. This is the empire's blind spot. Post-human systems can optimize endlessly, but they can never generate meaning, because meaning comes from building together. Meaning comes from shared memories, and meaning comes from shared responsibility, because we're all involved in long-term projects that can't be outsourced or automated. When people find dignity outside of compliance, the system will lose its psychological hold. That's when legitimacy truly migrates. Post-human empires will not fail because they are evil. They fail because they forget that humans matter. Nations do not arise from outrage. They rise when people rebuild dependency loops that were torn down long ago. Dependency loop where power requires consent, contribution, and accountability. This moment is not the end of something. This moment is the transition point, a window of opportunity that we could take advantage of, or we could just watch it go by. Empires always dissolve into something else, but united nations are built from the ground up, not the top down. Empires survive by making people irrelevant. United nations grow by making people essential. And history is very clear on which one lasts longer. Empires always vanish, but the people always remain. So I think it's time we get to work and start building our nation from the ground up. All right, that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching my video. Peace.